Welcome to The Health Line, issues that shape our well-being. I'm your host, Dr. Andrea Ault-Brutus. In The Health Line, we provide engaging and informative content on the factors that shape our health and well-being, along with innovative insights that help us gain a better understanding of our ever-evolving, complex healthcare system. Today, I'm very excited to interview Lawrence Levy, the Executive Dean of the National Center for Suburban Studies at Hofstra University. Prior to coming to Hofstra, Larry previously spent 35 years as a reporter, editorial writer, columnist, and what I just learned recently, a PBS host. Larry has won countless top awards for journalism, including being a Pulitzer finalist for in-depth works on suburban politics, education, taxation, housing, healthcare, and other key issues. Larry, welcome to The Health Line.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I was listening to the bio, and it made me realize that I'm really getting old.
No, we're all getting old, so you're in good company.
That was 35 years in my first career.
I know.
That was 17 more at Hofstra.
And you're only, 36? That's weird. That's
Right.
really weird.
Right.
So tell us more about yourself. I know you pretty well, but
Sure.
Tell the audience more about who you
Well,
are.
I almost would rather you do that because I don't want to sound like I'm bragging or anything like that.
Well, you have the right to brag. But go ahead.
I don't know. I've worked with some really brilliant people when I was at Newsday, at PBS, and it's certainly at Hofstra where there's a PhD in every office, right?
True.
Like you.
Oh, thank you.
My only real credentials for a show on healthcare is that I covered 8 presidential campaigns. I attended 18 or 19 national conventions. I basically had every job at Newsday, from covering civic groups at night when I first started to working in Washington and again talking about covering presidential campaigns. And while I was never a healthcare writer per se, I covered politics and public policy. And when you work in a state like New York, where a third of a $200 billion budget goes to healthcare, you got to learn a little bit about it. It's like studying for a final exam.
Correct. That's very true.
And of course, given my age, I spend much too much time in doctors' offices.
And I'm finding that myself, that's the same thing for me. So you're in good company once again. Okay. So we have the 2024 election coming up.
Yeah.
And we have
right upon us now.
Yeah, right upon us next month. Where does healthcare rank currently in 2024?
It's an intriguing question because there were some years, as you remember, where healthcare dominated the debates and the advertising. But this year, it does not rank terribly high on a list of what candidates are talking about and what even the public is telling pollsters that they care about. I would say that it's a shame because, again, so much of our public spending goes to healthcare in one form or another, Medicaid, Medicare, you name it. It affects so much about our lives, the quality of life, even the sustaining of life. Mm-hmm. It's the kind of issue that even though it's not dominating the debate, there are all kinds of consequences depending who wins. Now, there's a caveat to what I said. People may be shaking their head and say, what do you mean they're not talking about healthcare? Because women's health and abortion is dominating the debate. But abortion is often not thought of as a healthcare issue. It should be, I would think.
Yeah. It
crosses so many lines that it's apart from health insurance. It's apart from subsidies for drugs like that. Except for the abortion issue and IVF, healthcare, it's just not out there.
Well, let's focus in on reproductive rights and abortion care, as you brought up. That seems to be what has dominated within the healthcare space. So how do we even get here? Like, why is reproductive health and abortion rights such a big issue in 2024?
For the same reason that a lot of things become big issues. People lost something that they thought they had, something they thought was important, that they didn't expect that they would lose. As the movie said, they're mad as hell, and they really don't want to take it anymore. The Democrats have made abortion and women's health issues front and center of their top issues that they're campaigning against Trump. And it's probably the strongest, the most energizing issue that they have going for them, other than Donald Trump himself. And I'm not being sarcastic here. Trump is, and Republicans will tell you, often his own worst enemy, that he will alienate people who once voted for him. But other than that, abortion is the most powerful issue that Democrats have in bringing out not just Democratic women, but independent, soft, we call them soft Republicans, who feel that this is not only a healthcare issue, but it's a matter of respect. It's a matter of freedom, as the Democrats say. And Kamala Harris may rise and fall on the extent to which it does energize the Democratic base and others that they can build a bridge to.
So in addition to abortion rights and reproductive health care, and we both acknowledge that health care is not the biggest issue that voters are thinking about for the 2024 election.
Except for abortion,
Except for abortion. What are some other health issues like the ACA or prescription costs? Like what should voters think about when it comes to those other health issues that are usually dealt with at the federal level?
Republicans have read polls like everybody else, and they know that over the years, the Affordable Care Act, AKA also known as Obamacare, has become more and more popular with the public, including a lot of Republican governors. Those who, in fact, at first rejected it and came to realize, what am I, nuts? I can get billions of dollars from the federal government if I embrace this. I can take credit for providing health care without a huge cost or an unmanageable cost for the state government. And that's proven to be true. So again, just like abortion rights, once something belongs to someone, once something is considered important to someone, you got to be really careful about taking it away. Now, the Democrats are saying, and with some validity, that voters should be nervous about a next Trump administration when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, because he's saying vague things like, I'm going to do better health care. How are you going to do that? Mm-hmm. What changes are you going to make? He spent a good part of his first term trying to undo the Affordable Care Act and succeeded to some degree in ways that had consequences both negative and positive for the delivery of health care. The positives were more inadvertent in how they affected drug prices. There was a yin and a yang with pharmaceutical companies that ended up helping consumers. But generally speaking, Republican record on healthcare reform issues hasn't been strong in terms of activists and particularly consumer activists and healthcare activists.
It was very interesting. I was reading this report from the Kaiser Family Foundation, and it found that obviously prior to 2014, Republicans were really against the Affordable Care Act.
Absolutely.
In recent years, according to this poll from the Kaiser Family Foundation, that about 59% of all adults, regardless of their political affiliation, are now in favor of the Affordable Care Act.
Because one of the things that drives policymakers and politicians nuts is a gap between perception and reality on a lot of issues. Right now, the Democrats are being bedeviled by the gap between the perception on the economy, which is 2/3 of the people say it's awful, and the reality, it's one of the strongest economies we've had certainly in my lifetime, and it's a long time. Perception and reality on crime, people think it's high when, again, it's one of the safest periods we've ever had. Well, it's the same thing on healthcare. It took a while. The perception was that this was a big spending liberal program that was going to cost people and take away what they already had, which was employer paid or shared cost health care. But again, it finally, with more information and then experience, that gap closed. It didn't close quick enough for Hillary Clinton, obviously. She got hammered on that. You referenced the PBS show, and I had Hillary Clinton on some years after. And I asked her at one point, I said, so what did you learn? Mm-hmm. What have you learned looking back? And she said, well, I learned that I needed to enroll in the school of smaller steps. And I think that what you're going to see is that whoever is elected, publicly, the steps will be small.
Yeah, very incremental, as we discussed. Yeah.
And the reason for that is you have very powerful forces on all sides of the issue. And it's not one side versus another. There are all kinds of sides, the multifaceted diamond, gem.
Multiple stakeholders.
Yeah, that's better put. Thank you. Multiple stakeholders. And they exert countervailing forces. And in the end, if you can push it one way a little bit, you made progress. The other way a little bit, you've made progress. The dirty little secret, though, about the perception that not much is going to change with healthcare, so I don't have to pay attention to it, is that depending on who wins, they get to populate the bureaucracies. And this may come across as boring, really in the weeds stuff. But if you take an agency that's in charge of making rules based on laws. First, Congress passes laws, and then agencies make rules, and then enforcing the rules, or just simply administrative gatekeepers who can hold up reimbursement payments or keep bouncing them back, like insurance companies do to individuals. That can almost be, in effect, gutting a program in major ways. I'm on the board of a not-for-profit that delivers services for the developmentally disabled. I know that people in their world are extremely nervous, and they don't think that things are going to change dramatically on the big policy level. They are concerned about 6-month delays, 9-month delays in reimbursements. And if the federal government does take some dramatic steps, will New York State, be able to afford to pick up the slack, as they sometimes do when the feds cause problems? So this is something that most people aren't aware of, they're not thinking about, but it does matter who is in power. And you know what? You can't really say which side will do, because there are rules that progressives hate, and there are rules that conservatives hate. So whoever gets in is probably going to do their best, even if they can't get Congress to throw it out or to change it, are going to do their best to slow it and scuttle.
So what's very interesting, because normally with majority of the healthcare issues, usually the Democrats and the Republicans, or progressives versus the conservatives, they tend to disagree on a lot of healthcare issues. But one issue that they do agree on is the cost of prescription drugs. Yes. So there's an agreement that we need to lower the cost of prescription drugs, but there seems to be differences in how they do it, each party. You want to talk a little bit more?
What I've seen in watching the campaigns, and I still do a lot of talking head stuff based on my old career, like today. What I found is that the candidates are talking much less about what they are going to do than accusing the other side of not having done enough or anything at all. And I saw that in a debate. This wasn't a presidential debate, but it was in a congressional district debate, where one side was accusing the other of having done nothing or thwarting the other side's efforts to raise, to lower the cost of prescription drugs. The other side was accusing the one of having loaded up the legislation with all kinds of progressive things that had nothing to do with drugs. We never got to, in that debate, what drugs are you going to target? You're not going to be able to bring them all down. It took Biden, I think, 2 years to finally get insulin down, which was a monumental accomplishment. And you only have so much political capital, political bullets that you can use. But we don't know, unless maybe you go to the website of the candidates and get to the 74th page of the policy paper. And maybe you should do that. And shame on me that I have not done that yet. But the reality is that we are not hearing much about what's going to change.
Overall, we established that, unfortunately, a lot of people are not talking about healthcare policy except for reproductive rights. Just going into the 2024 election and thinking about, all right, whoever wins in 2025, what do you think would be the top issues when it comes to healthcare in addition to abortion rights? Like, what do you see down the road in terms of health policy?
Depending on who wins, there'll be different priorities. I mean, that's sort of like a duh. You'll see the Democrats moving as quickly as possible, Kamala Harris, to try to bring down, find coalitions with the Republicans who also want to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. I think that'll be a big target. But it also depends who controls Congress. You may have what some people would consider the nightmare, the other would consider the balancing of having a split government. You could have a president of one party, and you can have one or both houses controlled by the other party. Kamala Harris is ahead in the polls for president, and Republicans are ahead in terms of the swing races that'll probably determine who gets the gavels in Congress. So it really depends. If there is divided government, the gap between the rhetoric from both sides who are trying to position themselves for the next election and secure their bases, secure the right wing for the Republicans and the left wing for the Democrats, you're going to hear all kinds of highfalutin proposals to dramatically change things. You'll probably have Medicare for all back, which, whether you like it or not, has no chance whatsoever under any scenario of getting passed.
I agree with you.
Same for the folks who are going to, despite what the former President Trump says about national abortion ban, there is a segment of the Republican Party that's going to push for that and dare other Republicans who may have to run in primaries in conservative areas to vote against it. So it really depends on what the lineup is. If the election is close, there won't be a lot of movement. If one side should really effectuate a blowout, sweeping both houses and the White House, and doing it by what most people would consider a significant margin that gives them a mandate, then it changes a bit. Then one side or the other will take a chance to be more aggressive. They'll interpret it as a mandate. But as always is the case in those scenarios, they're going to overinterpret the size of the mandate they have. They will get themselves into trouble, and they will be voted out, whoever they are, 2 years from now.
Well, as you know, I always enjoy talking to you about politics. That's one of the things that you and I tend to do together. A lot of cup of coffee. Yes, yes. So with that said, and with us being almost out of time, any other thoughts you want to share with the audience?
Sure. I'm going to fall back on the generic, almost the obvious. Whatever side you're on regarding healthcare or any other issue, vote. It really does matter. Even in red states or blue states where there isn't even a competitive congressional race, politicians read polls and vote totals. They want to see what is exciting people, what is turning them off. So your vote could send a message even to the side you don't favor. Get out and vote, work for your candidates. If you do think an issue isn't being paid any attention to, I know this sounds corny, but write your representative. Show up at a town hall. Tell a pollster how you feel, because you're likely, especially in a swing state, going to get a lot of contact.
Very true, very true. So I wish we had more time, but we definitely need to have you back next year.
Sure.
And
see how wrong I was.
Well, or how right you were.
Maybe.
To see what happens once the election's over, what's going to happen in 2025. So we would love to have you back on the Health Line. But thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm really happy you were able to do the podcast today. So thank you, Larry, for coming on the Health Line. This is Andrea Ault-Brutus, and I hope everyone joins me next time here on the Health Line.